The crystalline walls of the research vessel Tranquil Dawn shimmered with a sickly yellow glow as another system failed. Captain Veltar pressed his translucent hand against the control panel, feeling the vibrations of his dying ship through his glass-like fingers. The gentle humming that had filled the corridors for months was now replaced by ominous creaking and the occasional spark from overloaded circuits. "Captain, we've lost main propulsion," announced Navigator Kethrin from across the bridge. Her voice carried the musical quality typical of all Zephyrians, but today it trembled with fear. The delicate being's body flickered between blue and purple hues, betraying her emotional state despite her attempt to remain professional. Veltar looked through the observation window at the nightmare surrounding them. The Kepler 442 system stretched out in all directions like a cosmic graveyard. Twisted chunks of metal drifted past their ship, remnants of vessels that had been foolish enough to attempt passage through this cursed region of space. Some debris still glowed with residual radiation, while other pieces had been compressed into unrecognizable shapes by the system's brutal gravitational forces. How long until life support fails completely? Veltar asked, though he dreaded the answer. Engineer Thylon's crystalline form darkened to a deep amber as he consulted his readings. 6 hours, Captain. Maybe 7 if we shut down non-essential systems. His voice carried the weight of a death sentence. The Zephyrian physiology was fragile, evolved on a peaceful world with stable weather and gentle gravity. They needed precise atmospheric conditions to survive, and their ship was no longer capable of providing them. The bridge fell silent except for the increasingly irregular beeping of failing systems. Each crew member understood their situation perfectly. They were trapped in a region of space that no civilized species dare to enter. The gravitational anomalies here could crush a ship in seconds, while the radiation storms would cook any living being from the inside out. It was a place where physics seemed to bend and break, where the normal rules of space travel became deadly suggestions. "Should we send a distress beacon, Captain?" Kethrin asked softly. Her question hung in the air like morning mist. They all knew it was pointless. The galactic databases were clear about systems like this one. They were marked in red, classified as absolute no-fly zones. Any ship entering them was considered lost with all hands. Veltar closed his eyes, his transparent eyelids casting rainbow patterns across his face. In his mind, he could see his home world as Zephyria Prime, with its crystal cities that sang in the wind and its peaceful inhabitants who had never known war or hardship. His crew trusted him to make the right decision, even when there were no right decisions left. "Yes," he said finally. "Send the beacon. Record our research data, and include it in the transmission. Perhaps someone will find it someday and learn from our mistakes." Thylon's fingers danced across his console with practiced precision. The distress beacon would broadcast their location, their situation, and their final scientific observations to anyone within range. It was a message in a bottle cast into an ocean of deadly space, with little hope of rescue, but a slim chance that their deaths might serve some purpose. The beacon activated with a soft chime that seemed almost cheerful given their circumstances. It would repeat their message every 30 seconds, calling out across the void for help that would never come. The signal would eventually fade as their power died, becoming just another ghost transmission in the cosmic static. "Now we wait," Veltar said, settling into his captain's chair. The Zephyrian furniture was grown rather than built, shaped from living crystal that molded itself to each individual's form. Normally it provided perfect comfort, but today it felt cold and distant. The crew began their final preparations with quiet dignity. They secured their research data, ensured their personal messages were recorded for their families, and made peace with their fate. There was no panic among the Zephyrians. Their species had long ago evolved beyond such crude emotions. Instead, they faced their end with the same grace they had lived their lives. Outside the ship, the Kepler 442 system continued its deadly dance. Radiation storms painted the darkness with sheets of green and gold energy, while massive gravitational waves pulled their ship closer to the debris field that would become their tomb. Other ships had died here before them, their crews equally certain that no rescue would come. The distress beacon pulsed steadily into the darkness, carrying their desperate plea to the empty cosmos. In 6 hours, maybe 7, the signal would die with them. The tranquil dawn would join the countless other wrecks drifting through the system, another monument to the galaxy's most dangerous region. None of them could have imagined that someone was actually listening. The distress beacon had been broadcasting for exactly 47 minutes when something impossible happened. The communication console on the bridge of the Tranquil Dawn suddenly crackled to life with a sound none of the Zephyrian crew had ever heard before, static mixed with what seemed like organic breathing. Unknown vessel. This is Captain Jack Morrison of the cargo hauler Stubborn Mule. We're picking up your distress signal loud and clear. What's your current situation out there? The voice that came through their speakers was unlike anything in the galactic databases. It was rough, with a gravelly quality that suggested the speaker had endured harsh conditions. More disturbing was a casual tone, as if responding to distress calls in the middle of deadly space storms was just another day at work. Captain Veltar stared at the communications officer, whose crystalline body had turned completely white with shock. Catherine's musical voice caught in her throat as she tried to respond. Captain, I'm reading an energy signature approaching from Sector 7. That's impossible, Engineer Thylon whispered, his amber glow flickering like a dying flame. Sector 7 is in the heart of the radiation storm. Nothing could survive in there. But their sensors didn't lie. A vessel was indeed moving through the deadly energy fields that surrounded them, and it was heading directly toward the Tranquil Dawn. The ship's design was unlike anything in their extensive databases. Blocky, industrial, and built with what appeared to be raw metal plating rather than the elegant curves and crystalline structures favored by civilized species. This is Captain Veltar, the research vessel Tranquil Dawn, he managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. We have suffered complete engine failure, and our life support systems are failing. However, I must warn you that this system is classified as a Class 9 hazard zone. No known vessel can survive these conditions. A sound came through the communicator that made every Zephyrian on the bridge recoil. Laughter, not the gentle, wind-chime laughter of their own species, but something deeper and more primal. It carried hints of genuine amusement, as if the human had just heard the funniest joke in the galaxy. Class 9 hazard zone, the voice repeated. Well, that explains why the shipping lanes are so empty around here. We use routes like this all the time back in human space. Keeps the pirates and tax collectors away, if you know what I mean. The Zephyrians exchanged confused glances. The concept of deliberately choosing dangerous routes was completely foreign to their peaceful nature. Why would any intelligent being voluntarily expose themselves to unnecessary risk? We're about 15 minutes out from your position, Morrison continued. My navigator is plotting a course through these gravity wells. Might get a little bumpy, but nothing we haven't handled before. On their main screen, the crew of the Tranquil Dawn watched in horrified fascination as the human vessel performed maneuvers that should have been physically impossible. The ship dove directly into a gravitational shear that had crushed 3 previous rescue attempts, then somehow emerged on the other side completely intact. When a particularly violent radiation burst swept across their path, the human ship simply adjusted its course and continued forward as if flying through cosmic lightning was perfectly normal. How are they doing that? Catherine asked, her musical voice rising to a pitch that made the bridge crystals resonate sympathetically. Their hull appears to be constructed from some kind of dense metallic alloy, Thylon reported, studying his sensor readings with growing disbelief. The radiation levels that should be cooking their crew alive are somehow being absorbed or deflected, and their propulsion system, I don't understand how it works. It's generating thrust in ways that contradict several fundamental laws of physics. The human ship continued its impossible approach, weaving between gravitational anomalies like a dancer moving through a minefield. At one point, it actually used a micro black holes pulled a slingshot around a debris field, gaining speed instead of being torn apart. Asterisk Stubborn Mule asterisk to Tranquil Dawn. Came Morrison's voice again. We're seeing some pretty nasty energy spikes on our sensors. You folks might want to move away from your outer hull sections. We're about to punch through a radiation pocket that's going to light up like a Christmas tree. The Zephyrians had no idea what a Christmas tree was, but they followed the advice anyway. Moments later, their ship was bathed in energy levels that should have killed every living thing aboard. Instead, The human vessel emerged from the deadly light show completely unharmed, its hull actually glowing with residual energy that it seemed to be converting into additional power. Docking in 60 seconds, Morrison announced cheerfully, "Hope you folks don't mind the heat. My crew runs a little warm." As the impossible rescue ship approached their vessel, Captain Veltar realized that everything they thought they knew about the limits of survival in space was about to change forever. The docking clamps of the stubborn mule attached to the tranquil Dawn with a sound that made every Zephyrian crew member flinch. It wasn't the gentle magnetic coupling they were used to. It was a harsh, mechanical grinding that spoke of brute force rather than elegant engineering. The entire ship shuddered as the two vessels locked together, and Captain Veltar couldn't help but worry that their delicate hull might crack under the stress. "Equalizing atmosphere now," came Morrison's voice through the comm. "Fair warning. We breathe a pretty thick mix compared to most species. Hope that's not a problem." The airlocks cycled with sounds that seemed almost violent to Zephyrian ears. Hissing, clanking, and what sounded like steam venting filled the corridor outside their bridge. When the inner door finally opened, the first thing that hit them wasn't sight. It was heat. A wave of thermal energy rolled through their ship like a physical force. The crystalline beings immediately began to glow brighter as their bodies tried to cope with the sudden temperature change. It was like standing next to a fusion reactor that had somehow learned to walk and talk. Then they saw the humans themselves, and every database entry about possible life forms suddenly seemed woefully inadequate. The first one through the airlock was Captain Morrison, a being that looked like it had been designed by someone with a very different idea of what constituted proper anatomy. Instead of the elegant crystalline structure of the Zephyrians, he was covered in something soft and flexible that somehow managed to contain what appeared to be liquid flowing beneath the surface. His head was topped with brown fibers, and two small spheres set in his skull tracked everything around him with unsettling focus. "Well, this is cozy," Morrison said, looking around their bridge with what the Zephyrians could only assume was approval. His voice came from a horizontal opening in the lower part of his head, revealing hard white structures inside that looked disturbingly like tiny weapons. Behind him came two more humans, equally bizarre in their construction. One was shorter and broader than Morrison, carrying a collection of tools that violated several safety protocols just by existing. The other was more slender, with longer head fibers and what appeared to be some kind of portable medical equipment. "Tom, get started on their propulsion systems," Morrison called to the tool carrier. "Beth, take a look at their crew. They're looking a little dim around the edges." The human called Tom Blake nodded and immediately began examining their engine displays with the kind of casual confidence that suggested he'd seen similar problems before. What disturbed the Zephyrians wasn't his competence. It was a complete disregard for proper safety procedures. "Yeah, I can fix this," he announced after barely 30 seconds of examination. "Looks like your plasma flow regulators got scrambled by the gravitational stress. Happens all the time in heavy G zones. I've got some universal adapters that should get you back online." He began pulling tools from his kit that shouldn't have existed. Some of them seemed to bend reality around themselves, while others hummed with energy levels that would normally require industrial-grade containment. Most disturbing of all, he handled them like they were simple hand tools, showing no fear of the dangerous forces he was manipulating. Meanwhile, Dr. Beth Collins approached the Zephyrian crew with her medical scanner active. The device was clearly designed for beings very different from themselves, but somehow it was reading their vital signs with perfect accuracy. "Interesting physiology," she murmured, studying the readings. "Silicon-based crystalline matrix with integrated photonic processing. You folks are basically living computers, aren't you?" Captain Veltar found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "What manner of beings are you? Your species isn't in any of our databases." Morrison's face did something that the Zephyrians would later learn was called smiling, though at the time it looked like a threat display. "We're humans from a little planet called Earth. Probably haven't made it into your fancy databases yet, because we only figured out faster-than-light travel about 50 years ago. But the conditions in this system," Catherine protested, her musical voice cracking with strain. "The radiation levels alone should have killed you instantly. How are you even alive?" Dr. Collins looked up from her medical work, that same strange facial expression crossing her features. "This? This is pretty mild compared to what we're used to. Earth's sun throws tantrums like this every few months. We just learned to build our ships tough and our bodies tougher. Engineer Tom was already deep in their engine systems, his hands moving with practiced efficiency among components that would normally require specialized containment suits to approach safely. The energy readings from his work were making their sensors scream warnings, but he seemed completely unbothered by the dangerous forces he was manipulating. You know, Morrison said conversationally, back home we call storms like this weather. Makes for great shipping routes once you know how to ride the currents. The Zephyrians stared at these impossible beings who treated galactic death zones like scenic highways, and began to realize that their understanding of what constituted survivable conditions might need some serious revision. As the repairs continued, the Zephyrians began to understand just how wrong their assumptions about survival had been. Tom Blake worked on their engines with the casual efficiency of someone fixing a simple household appliance, but the tools he used defied everything they knew about safe engineering practices. He wielded plasma cutters without protective gear, handled live antimatter containment units with his bare hands, and seemed completely unbothered when sparks of raw energy danced across his skin. "This is nothing," he said when Engineer Thylon expressed concern about the dangerous energy readings. "You should see what we deal with back home during solar flare season. Last year, my neighbor got struck by lightning 3 times in one afternoon and still managed to finish mowing his lawn." The casual way he mentioned surviving lightning strikes made every Zephyrian on the bridge flicker with alarm. A single electrical discharge would shatter their crystalline bodies into thousands of pieces. Yet this human spoke of multiple strikes as a minor inconvenience. Dr. Beth Collins was equally disturbing in her own way. While examining the Zephyrian crew, she casually mentioned that human medicine focused heavily on trauma care because their bodies were designed to keep functioning even when severely damaged. "Back on Earth, we have a saying," she explained while treating Navigator Kethrin's stress fractures. "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." Most of our medical training involves fixing people who probably should be dead, but somehow aren't. We gotten pretty good at patching folks back together. She showed them her medical scanners database, and the Zephyrians recoiled at what they saw. The human medical files contained treatments for conditions that would be instantly fatal to any civilized species: radiation poisoning, massive trauma, exposure to vacuum, and dozens of toxins that existed only on Deathworlds. "Your people regularly survive these conditions?" Captain Veltar asked, his voice barely audible. "Oh, these are just the common ones," Dr. Collins replied cheerfully. "We've got specialized treatments for much worse stuff. Volcano gas poisoning, deep sea pressure injuries, Arctic exposure, desert survival situations. Earth's a pretty rough neighborhood, so we learn to bounce back from almost anything." Captain Morrison, meanwhile, was studying their star charts with growing amusement. He pointed to several systems marked in red on their navigation display. Areas classified as absolutely impassable by galactic standards. "You folks avoid all these zones?" he asked. "That's a shame. Some of the best shipping routes in this sector run right through the middle of them. We make regular runs through systems twice as nasty as this one. But the gravitational stresses alone would crush any normal vessel," Thylon protested. Morrison shrugged, a gesture the Zephyrians found oddly expressive despite its simplicity. "You build your ships different when you grow up dodging asteroids and riding solar winds. Everything we make has to survive conditions that would turn most civilized technology into scrap metal." As if to prove his point, a massive solar flare erupted from the system's unstable star, painting space with sheets of deadly radiation. The Zephyrians braced for impact, knowing that energy levels this intense would cook them alive even through their ship shielding. Instead, the humans simply glanced at their instruments and continued working. "Heads up, folks," called Navigator Mike Chun from the Stubborn Mule. "We got a Class 7 flare incoming. Might want to avoid looking directly at the pretty lights." The deadly radiation washed over both ships like a cosmic tsunami. The Zephyrians watched their radiation detectors spike beyond maximum readings, while their automatic safety systems screamed warnings. But the humans didn't even pause in their work. Tom continued welding components with equipment that was now glowing white-hot from absorbed radiation, while Dr. Collins used the extra energy to power her medical devices. "This is actually kind of nice," Morrison commented, seeming to enjoy the lethal light show playing across their view screen. "Reminds me of the Aurora displays back home, though those were usually green instead of purple. You have phenomena like this on your home world?" Veltar asked weakly. "Earth sits in the middle of a pretty active stellar region," Morrison explained. "We get radiation storms, magnetic field reversals, asteroid impacts, volcanic winters, ice ages, and about a dozen other ways the planet tries to kill us on a regular basis. You learn to adapt, or you don't stick around very long." The casual way he mentioned planetary-scale disasters as routine weather made the Zephyrians question everything they thought they knew about habitable worlds. Their databases classified any planet with regular asteroid impacts as completely uninhabitable, yet humans spoke of such conditions as normal background noise. "What kind of world could produce beings like you?" Catherine whispered. Dr. Collins looked up from her work with that strange human expression they were learning to recognize as amusement. "Oh, Earth's just getting started with us. We've survived ice ages, supervolcano eruptions, magnetic pole reversals, and at least 6 different extinction-level asteroid impacts. Each time, we came back tougher than before." The Zephyrians began to realize they weren't just being rescued by another species. They were encountering something that redefined the very concept of survival in a hostile universe. With the tranquil dawn finally repaired and both ships safely beyond the worst of the radiation storms, Captain Veltar found himself staring at readings that still didn't make sense. Their engines were running better than they had in months, powered by modifications that should have been impossible. Tom Blake had somehow improved their efficiency by 30% using techniques that their most advanced engineers would have dismissed as fantasy. "Your plasma flow is smooth as silk now," Tom said, wiping his hands on a cloth that should have disintegrated from the residual energy clinging to his tools. "I rerouted your power coupling through a harmonic buffer system we use on cargo haulers. Should handle gravitational stress a lot better from now on." The Zephyrian engineer, Thylon, studied the modifications with a mixture of admiration and terror. The human had essentially rebuilt their engine core using principles that violated several fundamental laws of physics. Yet everything worked perfectly, more than perfectly. Their ship was now capable of operations they had never dreamed possible. Dr. Collins finished her final medical scans of crew, her equipment somehow calibrated to work perfectly with Zephyrian physiology, despite being designed for an entirely different type of biology. "You're all looking much better," she announced, "though I'd recommend avoiding high-stress situations for a few days. Your crystalline matrix needs time to fully stabilize after that radiation exposure." "How did you learn to treat our species so quickly?" Navigator Catherine asked, her musical voice filled with wonder. "We've never encountered humans before today. Basic medical principles are pretty universal," Dr. Collins replied with a shrug. "Plus, after dealing with a variety of weird injuries we see on Earth, you learn to improvise. I once had performed surgery on a guy who'd been struck by lightning, frozen solid, and then thawed out by a volcanic vent, all in the same afternoon." The casual way she mentioned what sounded like 3 separate death sentences delivered as a single event made the Zephyrians realize that human medicine had evolved to handle situations that would be considered impossible by galactic standards. Captain Morrison approached Veltar with something that looked like a datapad, but was clearly built to withstand conditions that would destroy normal electronics. "Here's our contact information," he said. "If you folks ever need help with anything, or if your government wants to establish trade relations, just send a message to these coordinates." Veltar accepted the device with trembling appendages. The implications of what he held were staggering. First contact with new species was supposed to be a carefully orchestrated event involving diplomatic protocols, cultural exchanges, and months of preparation. Instead, he was exchanging contact details with beings who treated galactic death zones as convenient shipping lanes. "I must ask," Veltar said carefully, "how many of your people exist? Are humans a rare species in the galaxy?" Morrison's face did that expression again, the one the Zephyrians were learning meant amusement rather than aggression. "Rare? Not exactly. Earth's got about 8 billion people. Give or take a few 100 million, and that's just the home world. The bridge of the tranquil dawn fell completely silent. 8 billion. The entire Zephyrian civilization numbered perhaps 50 million individuals across 12 worlds. The idea that a single planet could support 8 billion members of a species as durable was almost incomprehensible. Most of them tougher than us. Tom added cheerfully as he packed up his impossible tools. We're what you call the soft crowd, cargo haulers and medical personnel. You should meet our construction workers or deep space miners. Those folks make us look like delicate flowers. The concept of beings even more resilient than these humans who treated radiation storms as scenic routes was enough to make several Zephyrian crew members flicker to their dimmest settings. We should probably get moving, Morrison said, checking a timepiece that seemed built to survive planetary impacts. We've got cargo to deliver to 3 more systems before the end of the week. 2 of them are Class 10 hazard zones, so we're running behind schedule. Class 10 hazard zones. The Zephyrians didn't even have instruments capable of measuring conditions that severe. Such regions were marked on their charts simply as void, areas where no known form of matter or energy could exist. It has been an honor meeting your species. Veltar managed to say as the humans prepared to return to their ship. You have saved our lives, and I fear we can offer little in return. Are you kidding? Dr. Collins laughed. That deep, organic sound had frightened him at first, but now seemed oddly comforting. We got to meet a new species today. That's worth way more than a simple rescue operation. As the stubborn mule detached from their vessel and prepared to depart, Morrison's voice came to the calm one final time. Safe travels, Captain. And remember, if you ever need anything, humans are always willing to lend a hand. It's just how we're built. The Zephyrians watched as the human ship disappeared into a radiation field that registered beyond their instruments' ability to measure, heading toward destinations that existed only as warnings in their navigation database. Captain Veltar began composing his report to the Galactic Council, knowing that everything about interstellar civilization was about to change. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same.